Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. When I went to log into Zoom at 20 after, my computer crashed. And then I got all that settled. And then I got Zoom. I went to open Zoom and it wanted to do upgrades instead of opening.
Oh,
My apologies to everyone.
well, at least you're all up. At least you're upgraded.
I'm upgraded. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, committee's here. Thanks, everybody. So we'll call the meeting to order at 6:34. So I'm going to do a little juggling because I see we have Kristen and Mary Ann in the meeting. So why don't we go ahead and jump to our budget reviews between Kristen and Mary, or
this is
do one
Mary
of you
Ann.
need to go first? Yeah.
I'm not, I told the trustees that I was on it, that we were on at 7 p.m. So
Okay, good.
I just logged in so that I don't forget to,
I
okay?
got you. No,
All
no,
right.
that's good. Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right, so
Okay.
we'll be back with you. Okay. So that basically just answered my question about who should go first. So Kristen, why don't we jump right into your proposed budget for FY25, and I'm going to pull it up and share my screen. Let's see.
Okay, good. That's what I have.
All right, great, good. All right, so this is pretty straightforward because if I'm not mistaken here, you basically are proposing a level budget.
Correct.
So no changes to any of your operating costs at all.
Correct.
Okay. All right, and then we will obviously the FY25 budget will have increases on staff wages due to contractual increases. We don't usually discuss those as part of this meeting because they're really determined by contract. But okay, I see had a couple of notes in the capital request section.
Yes.
One of which Bob and I serve on the capital planning committee. We met last night and we got a preview of kind of a request that you're going to be submitting for a new cruiser. I don't think we need to go in depth on that tonight because I think you still are going to. We're going to just the capital planning committee is going to discuss that with you.
Right.
And once you've
Could I
settled,
just mention just a little bit about it so that
Sure.
potentially the finance committee has an understanding whether they want to back that or not?
Sure.
And it's just really, it'll be very quick, I promise, AJ.
No problem, please.
So as we were all here not too long ago, when I was asking for more money to fix that one cruiser 2016, cruiser number 3, if everyone remembers that, we were sort of debating whether or not it was worth putting the money into it. At the time, we thought it was potentially worth the money putting into it, and we did. We put the money into it, but it is now continuing to have more problems. I don't want to put any more money into something that is going to end up just being, broken down on the side of the road, so to speak, which is what I fear is coming. So basically, it's just because of the issues we had before. It had been doing okay, but now we're finding that some more issues are coming up, particularly in the area of the electric portion of the car and the wiring. So that's it.
Okay, got it. All right, and then you've got this other entry on here for speed boards. I know we had a a purchase, was it 2 years ago, of the speed boards? Are these additional speed boards that you're proposing?
Yes, they would be
Okay.
additional speed boards, and that is because of many requests coming in from residents. That they're finding that they feel the speed boards are a good reminder for not only them, but they see other people coming through town and slowing down, and they are hopeful that we could sort of address the traffic and speeding issues with one of those deterrents.
Okay,
We
so would
have
this
a
be,
huge difference, so.
yeah, and so we have 3 right now that we've got deployed, right?
Correct.
And is the proposal here to add a 4th, or is it more than one additional one?
I potentially would like to have 2 more.
Okay, and this dollar figure that you have here, is that the cost for 2 additional boards, or is that one
That
additional speed
cost,
board?
if I could just, let me bring up my email real quick because I did
Okay.
get just a quote. So give me one quick second and I will bring that up.
Becky, did you want to?
I just
Chime in
wanted to
well.
mention this too would need to go to capital.
Right.
Yeah,
That's the one. The last time you requested speed boards, the warrant article was for $12,000 for 3.
Yes, so I just wanted to make sure that that was an accurate account, and what I'm bringing up is that that would be per speed board. So
per speed board.
currently right now, and they don't typically change too much in cost. Currently right now it is 3,614 per.
Okay, got it. All right, so Kristen, we've actually, I don't even know if Ellen has followed up with you yet, but we were gonna invite you to the next capital planning meeting to review your cruiser request. I would recommend that we tackle both the cruiser request and the speed board request at that meeting. And so if you, I know you already submitted a bunch of bids and paperwork on the cruiser.
Right.
If you could do the same thing for
Sure.
the speed boards, and we'll, so in terms of process, you'll present that to capital planning. We'll discuss it. We'll have questions. We'll talk with you about it. Capital planning will then eventually take a vote about whether to recommend moving forward with one or both of those purchases. And then we'll bring it back to the finance committee to discuss options for funding both of those projects if they are going to pass at next year's town meeting. So that'll be the process we follow for that. So I'm going to open it up to questions to the committee about the budget or anything else that we discussed tonight. So let me go with Jim Hemingway and then Bob.
Yes, Kristen, how dependable have these speed boards been? At least the original 3. Have they stood up well, broken down? What verdict do you have on them?
So far, so good, Jim. We have not had any issues in regards to them defaulting or breaking down because they are solar. During times where it's they're not really getting solar powered up, we sometimes have a couple issues with them not displaying the speed, but that's very infrequent. I was just alerted today though by Highway that one of the speed boards is sort of acting a little funky. So tomorrow Officer Peltier and I are going to be going out and going into the boxes to do a reset and to see what the issues were. But overall, over the past 2 years, no issues at all, except for the expected. And I think, Jim, I think they're actually have been pretty helpful. You'll find the majority of people are saying, oh, wow, it reminded me to check my speed. So I think they're helpful in that way. You're always going to have people that sort of ignore it or take it as a challenge. but we try to work with them.
Have arrests for speeding gone up or down since the boards were installed?
Citations, overall.
Citations.
Yeah, so luckily we haven't had to arrest speeders. But citations overall, I think have sort of been level. But it has given us the ability to say, as we're pulling someone over, did you not see the sign? So people take responsibility and we have a little bit more of an education moment. So I think we're still battling speeders coming through the center of town. I found that the neighbors on Pelham Hill have told me that people slow down for them as they're walking more. I think it's still an uphill battle.
Thank you.
All right, Bob.
Yeah, hi, Kristen. I was just going to ask.
Hi, Bob.
Number one, that the board that's on Pelham Hill was acting a little bit strange and showing single digits, which didn't reflect what I was going recently, 2 days ago. But I also, and as far as the capital requests, I'll wait to talk to you when we see you down there.
Okay, is there anything that I should prep for?
Well, I'm going to ask you about the cruiser and about the old cruiser that we kept, and whether that's still in service, and whether this new old cruiser is going to be in service, because that's a concern of mine that we have all these cars that we
Agreed.
replace and then we keep. So
Agreed. Would it
yeah.
also be helpful if I sent the committee some of the invoices of the things we had recently fixed on it or had fixed prior? Do you want to see those or not necessary?
Yes.
Oh yeah, you can show me the record. That'd be wonderful. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Kristen.
Susie.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi, Susie.
We got a really helpful chart from the fire department. They have a lot of different equipment, but Lenny put together a chart and it let us know the current vehicles were listed, the year that they were bought, and the projected replacement and replacement costs. I don't want to burden you with more work, but I really don't have a sense of what vehicles the police department has now. And if it would be possible for somebody to write up a chart that says these are the 4 cruisers, 2 cruisers, 1 cruiser, then we would be able to sort of keep a history in mind. Maybe that's in the capital plan already. I don't read it for that, but maybe that's where the information is.
It
Okay,
is.
I actually, oh, sorry, Becky. I actually can even, I have an officer who loves to do charts like this, Officer Pelletier. I'm going to have him create something a little bit more for us as well. We'll have the years, the mileage, etc.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep. That'd be helpful. So I think that'd be helpful to bring to your meeting with capital planning, right?
Absolutely. I'll have it sent out before the meeting. I think, Becky, I'm scheduled for next Wednesday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
So
Okay, any other questions?
I'll have everything emailed out prior so we have time to look it over.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any hands, so I think we can let you go, Kristen. Appreciate
Okay.
appreciate you taking the time and going through this with us. I also should say, I mean, I think we appreciate you presenting a level budget that helps.
Okay.
Voters do too.
Big deal.
Great. Wonderful.
Okay.
Glad I can make some people happy while I'm asking also for a cruiser.
Mhm. Okay.
I
All right.
appreciate you all, and I always appreciate the questions. And if anyone has anything else they're looking to see, if you can give that to me in advance, maybe in an email, so I can prepare ahead of time. I'm happy to get as much information as we need.
Right. Terrific. And I'll
Okay.
see you next week at capital planning. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
All
Thank
right. Good
you.
night. All right. Okay, guys, so I'm gonna jump around because we have about 10 minutes, 12 minutes until Mary Ann joins us to talk about the library budget. So why don't we, actually, yeah, why don't we do minutes? If folks can pull up their copy of the minutes from November 28th. And I didn't have any questions or changes needed myself, but did anybody have any comments or questions about the minutes?
No, they're,
I have one comment.
George?
Under A, number 14, veterans benefits underspent. I know every year this is kind of a tricky one because Ryan's trying to be careful and make sure we don't come up short. I'm just wondering, when we do the FY25 budget, if we can talk more about this line, because it might be something we can fund the way we fund the unemployment line, where maybe we put in, you know, an amount and let it roll over year to year, and then we get to a
Yeah.
point where we only have to add to it incrementally, or we don't even have to add to it when it's at a certain level. You know, I think we could lower the amount in it, take a chance
Right.
that it's enough, and then the subsequent year, then we will definitely have enough. So just something to think about during the upcoming budget process.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
there
maybe
any-
it could be the
Yeah.
maybe it could be the kind of thing, George, where our sort of rule is to do that incremental funding each year if the balance in that line dips below a specific number or something, you know,
Something like that.
along those
Yeah.
lines.
I mean, we need to think about it, you know, look at it closely, but
Mhm.
it's always, I mean,
Okay.
it's always been a generator of free cash, and it looks like it was last year, but,
Yeah.
you know, maybe we can do something, you know, lower the budget slightly.
Right.
And in the first year, take a
Okay.
chance, roll the dice, and we got FinCom reserve if we need it.
Right. Okay. We'll definitely discuss that with Ryan. Susie.
Are there any parameters on a budget line rolling over? Is there any rules about that?
Restraints,
Um,
Vicky?
There are some, you know, it's got to be something that has to be approved by the accountant. And she applies all the statutory rules. So I can't tell you exactly what she applies, but she's the one who has to sign off. And she watches it for like the reval is, you know, tends to be most every year, but it does, you know, it's something that you need to build for. The veterans benefits, you're not building for a once every 3-year event. Like you are in you know, with the reval or the audit or the other things that are more typically done that way. Whether the only thought I had, George, was potentially, I mean, the state is supposed to reimburse us 75% of what we spend on that line. But they don't get it done in 1 year. It can take up to 3 years to get the money back from them. So potentially, maybe if we could try to have 25% of that amount that's been recommended by the VA in there, since in the end that's what we'll pay, but we'll still need to fund the full amount, like you said. And if we don't set up a fund, we can't be certain on the carryover.
Well, yeah, we
So-
don't need to brainstorm it now. We can talk about it in the future, but I'll tell you what I will do as the liaison to the accountant. I will send her an email and ask her if there would be any restrictions on that line. And
Cool.
if she says no, then we can have the conversation. If she says yes, you can't do it on a line like that, then it's dead in the water. And I won't bring it up again.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay. Not seeing any other hands. I'll make a motion to approve the November 28th minutes as written.
not second.
I don't think we have any other discussion. So George, you want
Arvanitis abstains.
to? Bob?
Sorry, I was
I think you're on
muted.
mute.
Grove's eye.
Yeah.
Hey, I make an editorial statement. You gotta do something about the lighting over there, AJ.
I know. I know, I'm in my Brooklyn office and I always have this problem with Zooms from here. Sorry. I might make an adjustment in my chair, see if that helps.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Stein, aye.
Walton, I.
Okay, great. All right, that motion passes 6 votes to 0, with 1 abstention. All right, I'm gonna jump. I think we still have 5 or so minutes before we discuss the library. So I'm gonna jump ahead to the 4-town prep, because I think that's gonna be pretty brief. I'll just give you guys a couple of updates. I had a lengthy discussion with Anna Haird. I think I'm pronouncing her last name right. Last week, who's the school committee's new this year rep to the regional school committee. This will be her first 4-town meeting that she's attended, so we sort of spent some time just kind of prepping her on what to expect. She confirmed, and I saw it on the agenda, that the regional school committee is meeting tonight, probably right now. And there is an item on the agenda, which is 4-town meeting preview. Earlier today, there were no budget related documents. I noticed just before I hopped on this Zoom that there was a new document posted to Board Docs, the site they use to kind of manage their agenda and attachments. But it was not there was no actual budget shared in that. So I think that's probably coming in the next couple of days. I told Anna, I asked her if she can forward anything she receives, whether it's an agenda or budget documents that are going to be handouts that are going to be discussed at the meeting. If she can forward those as soon as she gets them, she's free to do that. I think you should know a couple things about that meeting tonight. One is, I think Doug Slaughter has appointed an interim finance director for the district, although that person is going to, from what I understand, there's going to be like a group of 3 people who kind of share work responsibilities of, what is usually in a normal year a budget director, a finance director. There also is a motion to rescind the debt authorization for the track project that I guess is going to be voted on tonight. And I talked with Anna a little bit about that. And I think the thought here is that some members of the committee want to rescind that vote because it's kind of restricts the region in terms of what kind of project they can pursue. Basically, a track with an artificial turf field in the center. And I think their thought is they want to basically put forward a new debt, rescind that one and move forward with a new debt authorization that provides, I think, more kind of flexibility. That I'm going to try to watch the recording of that meeting, so I'll probably have more updates to share. I think that's it. Are most of us going to be participating on Saturday morning? Anybody not able to participate in terms of finance committee members? Bob?
I'm not sure yet. There's a march on Saturday for Gaza that I'm going to participate in, but I'm not sure whether I'll be able to attend or whether I'll have to break out of that Zoom and go off. But anyway, I'm not sure yet, but it's possible that I'll miss that one.
Okay.
Sounds to me like
Susie?
I wondered
go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead. Sorry, Susie.
I wondered if on that agenda, they are planning to make a new authorization or it's just the rescind tonight.
There was only mention of a rescind in the agenda that I saw earlier today. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know procedure if they're allowed to immediately advance anew, or if that's something that needs to be posted. I'm not sure.
No.
So.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions or any comments? I mean, I think unlike some other years, I don't think there's a lot for us to sort of prep, not knowing kind of what the agenda for Saturday's
Right.
meeting is. I mean, Anna did mention, like, and I think we were expecting this to be prepared for to see a potentially significant increase in the overall school budget. I think she mentioned, just because of the new contract agreement that was reached last year had a number of significant increases, and so I think she wanted the finance committee to be sort of prepared to see that reflected as a significant increase. And then of course I think there's less pandemic related support that for the region to tap into to kind of ease some of the budget pressure. So anyway, we'll see more presumably on Saturday. Okay, that's it on for town prep. Marianne, are you ready now to chat about the library budget?
Yes, yeah.
Great.
So I'm joined tonight by Michelle Regan Ladd, Elizabeth Murphy, and Brad Foster, who are all library trustees. So Brad might jump in to clarify something or to answer a question. You all have the proposed budget, right?
Yeah, we do, and I'm gonna actually share it right now on the screen. Okay.
Okay.
Everybody see that okay? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
All right. Yeah, do you want to walk us through this?
sure. So the finance committee asked for a level services budget. And I started thinking about what it would take to offer the services that are currently being offered. So this budget reflects a request for 3 additional hours for in the library assistant line. So this would be for the library assistant who currently works 12 hours a week. And I'm asking that we add 3 hours a week to that position, bringing it up to 15 hours a week. It's a difference of, I'm going to look at my spreadsheet, $3,106. I'm sorry about the puppy. And there's just a lot of increased administration that I'm required to do, a lot of it because of COVID. None of this stuff takes hours and hours to do, but when you add it all up, it takes hours and hours to do. So, library meetings and library programs are now on Zoom. So that means somebody has to make a link and post a link and record the meeting and submit the recording to the town clerk. And for program, keep a contact list and send weekly emails with the Zoom link. And then there's increased administration for in-person programs because the space we have is limited. The number of participants is more important. Before COVID, we didn't really take registration for all of our programs, but now we want to keep the number of participants to 10 or 12 people so that the space feels safe. And people expect email reminders now, like the dentist office does or the doctor's office. They expect that from the library. So people will forget and say, well, why didn't you send out a reminder? And so the public is asking for that kind of thing. And it's important for us to try and meet their needs. We've had an increase in public record requests. I've been the library director for just about 16 years now. And if I think back to, even up to 3 years ago, I don't think I ever had a public record request. And now, you know, there are several a year, and they don't, well, sometimes they take hours to do. And sometimes they just take minutes to do, but they interrupt the workflow, and it's one more thing that I'm required to do. There's an increase in time spent coordinating staffing, since staff stays home if they're sick now. Or volunteers stay home if they're sick. And then we still have a decrease in volunteers that we had pre-COVID, because there's just no place for them to be. If 2 people are working in the staff work area, they're always within 6 feet of one another. And so we just haven't returned to having volunteers on board as much as we used to. We're still offering outdoor pickup. Fortunately, that is not requested as often as it once was, but it's still being used a couple of times a week. And while we haven't returned to the full level of programs, there's a demand for programs, both in-person, passive, and take home. And programming from a library that doesn't have space to actually host programs is labor intensive, takes creativity and planning. And I just don't have the time to do it all. So I'm asking for more hours in the library assistant line so that I can hand off some of the administrative stuff to her, so I can have time to do the higher level stuff that I need to do. And then everything else is pretty much the same, except when you get down to the operating allocation line 18 down on the bottom, the second half under revenues. And I'm asking for an increase of $1,000 in that line. A few years ago, we added $2,000 to that line for programming, and I'm asking for another $1,000 for programming, $1,000 for programming. As you can see, I spend $20,000 a year on programming, and so right now, all but 2,000 of it comes from other sources, either through collaborative relationships that I have with other town boards or outside agencies, or grants that, I spend more time grant writing and getting grants, and researching grants. But it's a lot of money. There's a lot of demand for it. It adds a lot of value to the community. It's enriching and education and culturally interesting and useful. And I would like for the library's budget to reflect that and to support programming. We spend about $1,000 a year on story time, and story time is paid for by the Friends of the Library, and collaboration with the Community Network for Children. We split the cost of story time. And story time is an essential service that shouldn't be dependent on fundraising. So so this year's budget request is $100,813, and that is $4,106 increase. So does anybody have any questions?
All right, let's start with April, and then we'll go to Susie.
See, I was wondering if in your figures, how many people do you think, or do you approximately attend your programs annually?
Oh,
how many people are we talking?
Yeah,
Like
it's 4,000.
4,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Susie.
On line 20 and 21, are you saying that there is no projection for the dog tag or state aid?
No, what I'm hoping to do with state aid and the dog tag, and I've been doing this for a number of years, is the library is certified to receive state aid. I'm hoping to save that money and use it for the construction project. And then right now I have about I think it's $1,300 in the dog tax line. And that's dog tax and revolving fund. And I'm hoping to reserve that for, again, things related to the construction project or consultants. I've used that line for consultants a couple of times in the past, so that I have funds available if I have needs for those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question about that? So I guess one thing I'm trying to wrap my head around is sort of regardless of how I see. So you would only record those revenues here in this budget table if they were being applied to this particular year's operating budget. Is that the practice?
Right.
Okay, got it. Right. So so like for instance, last year, I guess our current FY24, you've the library is receiving some amount of state aid, but it's not being directly applied to the FY24 budget, the current year's budget. So that's why it's represented as a 0 on this table.
Right, right, because
okay,
I'm definitely planning to use state aid for the library construction project, so it'll be a capital expenditure. So when I report it to the state, it'll be reported as a capital expenditure too.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah, I just want, I'm wondering whether that's a proper use of that money, but I don't know the answer to that question myself, but I certainly think it bears looking into. But I want to make a point that, I heard your logic and your explanation of why you're requesting an increase for your aid by what, 3,000 and some other money, another 1,000 in the budget. And I just can't help but think that that is not level services to add more employee time to the library's function. It's actually increasing the services by that amount. So it doesn't really accord with that policy that we have tried to lay out as a guideline for budget requests. But as far as the state aid going to construction, it just doesn't sound right to me. Please explain to me, Mary Ann, because I don't understand how that could be proper use of the money.
So the state aid, I actually asked the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, again, I apologize about the puppy. I asked the Board of Library Commissioners if that money could be used for capital expenditures, and they said absolutely. The Board of Library Commissioners says that money can be spent. Remember, it's state aid to public libraries, and it can be spent how the trustees and the library director think it's best applied. And we already know that the library construction project is going to cost more than we anticipated when town meeting voted on it. So this is a way to meet some of those additional costs without asking the town for more money.
I just make one last comment. If I took the state aid and the dog tag money together, it would more or less equal the amount of increase in funding you're asking for. So that does stand out in my mind. So, that means we have to fund this, and we're funding the library construction project as a completely different item in our financial plan, our financial program. So I understand the pressures that are being put on you with rising construction costs, but again, it doesn't seem right to me that this should be done this way.
And if you asked me what I spent that money on, it might be that, so the expenditure in fiscal year 22 and 23, I used to pay for consultants who did helped us with some focus groups and mediated discussions and long range. So it's, it can be used to support the library's operating budget, and it has been used to support the library's operating budget. but I've also had the opportunity to try not to use that to support the library's operated budget, and I've been very sort of creative and determined about finding other sources of funding. And since I started as library director, I've been trying to, I've talked a lot here at Finance Committee about building a sustainable operating budget. When I started as library director, the town didn't appropriate enough money to cover my salary. And so I was sort of forced to find sources of funding to pay myself. And I think that I think town employees' budget, salary should be covered by the town appropriation and not dependent on fluctuating sources of revenue. And I think the essential services that the library offers should be covered by a sustainable operating budget. State aid, fluctuates based on the whim of the state. And sometimes I've gotten as much as $5,000 in a year, and sometimes I've gotten as much as little as $1,800. So it's not a sustainable source of funding for the essential services.
So I just on Bob's point, I mean, I think if it were a problem, and to be honest, it doesn't sound like it was, or you asked for clarification from appropriate state board, and they said that it was a reasonable use of those funds. But I guess suppose if let's excuse me, let's imagine a scenario where there was some restriction on how that state aid could be spent that prohibited you from using it for construction costs. I assume it could be like a simple fix, which would be applying that state aid line to this year's operating budget and then reducing by that, whatever that amount is, the Friends of the Spear allocation, which I'm assuming just comes from your fundraising, the Friends of the Library fundraising pool. So like if you had to, like if for some reason you had to apply the state aid to this year's budget, I'm assuming you could probably do that and then just take less money from the Friends of the Library donations to fund this year's.
Right.
Again, it doesn't sound like it's a big issue.
Yes, there is flexibility with the Friends of the Library and then the trust fund that the trustees manage. But there isn't a question of whether or not we can spend state aid on the construction of a new library for the town of Shutesbury. It's a perfectly acceptable use of the funds. So,
Okay.
and it's my job to know
right.
that, and I know that
Right.
because I do my job. Okay. And okay.
Yep, fair enough. Yep. Okay. And then the only other question or comment, I just wanted to clarify that what we're seeing here, which as a flat salary line for you, that's just because we don't have a cost of living factor, available right now, right? I mean, so that whatever the personnel board ends up approving for town employees, I'm assuming will get applied to that line. Is that
right? To both of those
correct?
lines.
Yeah, that's correct.
Actually, both that line and the library assistant
aid,
line.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think for committee members, we should be aware that the salary allocation town meeting line, which we're seeing right here, is $79,057, is kind of pre-cost of living increase.
Becky has a comment to make about that.
Becky, yeah.
AJ, the personnel board had already determined the rate. It is 3%, but we asked the employees not to change the COLAs just in case they don't have the right information, and all the salary lines are adjusted in the draft version of the budget, not in the request. That's
Becky,
how
I'm confused.
keep it clear. Sorry, George,
What's 3%?
this year's COLA.
Oh, we haven't calculated it yet.
Oh, you're right.
We're waiting for the
Sorry.
CPI for
No, you
January.
said you had done it before, but you had already done it last year for this year, and anyway, you're right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it could be more than 3%. Because remember, it lags the way we do it. So all that inflation has
Right, I
kind of been
apologize.
lagging. No, that's okay. I just wanted to make,
We had a discussion about it and I thought it was done. My
yeah, it's
fault.
timing. So it isn't done. So yeah, like AJ said, we'll calculate the amount, and this budget amount of 108.13 will obviously be something higher. And Becky, also the select board are the ones who are reviewing the library assistants increased hours, right?
Yep,
And they're the ones who are going to approve it.
yep.
Okay, that's good to
Select
know. All
board
right.
approved.
That's right.
If it gets approved.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mary Ann, or I suppose the trustees? Mary Ann, I know I think you sent an email about this, but while we have you, could you give us like the sort of top line update on fundraising, which I know it sounded like it was a productive
Hmm.
season for you. Do you have that?
Yes.
Is it too
Yeah.
complicated?
So, Giving Tuesday, the total is $53,150. Something like 180 donors. Might be 178, it might be 182, something like that. And then the Road Town Turkey Trot took in a little over $15,000. So that was, mostly in the month of November that the Friends of the Library raised, what does that equal? $68,000. And then they had a soups and stews dinner and raised another $1,000. And they had a Shutesbury swag sale where they sell their t-shirts and calendars, and raised $500. And then they got an out of the blue $1,000 donation that wasn't related to any of the fundraising. So 69,570,000 all in the last less than 4 weeks. So I know I was sort of adding up how much the Friends have taken in this year. And it's more than $130,000 in the past 12 months. In this little tiny town of Shutesbury, and that's just for the new library.
Yeah. Can you, do you have, this may not be at your fingertips, but do you have like a rough idea of what the current balance is in the private fundraising new library fund, whatever you call it, like how much has been raised to date?
I think between $520,000 and $530,000. So we updated the banner on the side of the building, and that was 460,000. And then we've raised 70,000 since then. So that's 530, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right. Okay, great. I see a couple hands up, Bob and then Jim Walton.
Yeah, Mary Ann, I'm just curious now in terms of what what the town has voted to support your project, our project, and what the estimate is, how the estimates are coming through. Where do we stand in terms of the financials and in terms of completing this project with the available resources we have? What are your views on that? What are your ideas?
You know what? I'm going to take the computer in another room and close the door and ask you to ask your question again. So I'm sorry, Bob, I couldn't hear you. Can you ask your question again?
Sure. I'm just concerned because of the rising construction costs have forced us to revise the scope of the project. And we have limited funds that have been allocated through the grant and through the town meeting. And I'm just wondering where we stand in terms of the of it being able to complete the project with the available money that we have on the table?
So we had a cost estimate done at the end of schematic design 2, and at that point, we felt like we were on budget. It is now a project that's going to be more than $8 million. And we are awaiting a cost estimate at the end of design development. We decided to do some extra site work. We did an extra round of perk testing to see if we could put the leach field in a different location, and that delayed things by about a month. So while we expected to have a design development cost estimate by now, it'll be closer to the end of the month. So when we have that cost estimate, we'll see if we're still on budget. I got a little grant. The Friends of the Library have raised about $200,000 since town meeting that wasn't allocated at that time. And it's important to remember that we have a one-of-a-kind grant that pays 75% of the actual eligible construction costs. So while the costs have gone up since that, $6.4 million estimate that we had, the grant amount has gone up. So the amount that the town is responsible for, isn't everything on top of the $6.4 million. So the Friends of the Library are very clearly determined to continue fundraising. Townspeople are united behind the project and are supporting it with generosity that sometimes leaves me speechless. Imagine that. And we're gonna just keep doing everything we can to keep the project on budget. And we'll know more, in a few weeks when the next cost estimate is and then we'll have another cost estimate at the end of design development. But we won't really know what it's gonna cost until we go out to bid. And so we're working very hard to make sure we're ready for that.
Thank you. We look forward to getting the further information when you get it.
All right, Jim Walton.
Yeah, just getting back to the budget exercise here. And this is just not a question, but just a comment. I think the format here that Mary Ann puts forth is really helpful to have 3 years or 4 years of actual data here, plus the current year's budget as well as what's proposed for the coming year. And maybe this, from a finance committee perspective, we should be thinking maybe or considering this for some of the other departments, this type of format for future budget reviews.
Yeah, George.
I would just follow up on what Jim just said and just add one thing that would be helpful is if there was an additional column at the right-hand side that showed the variance differences in each line year to year, 24 to 25. So when we're looking at the budget, we can see where the changes are and know the dollars. And we talk about them, but it's really helpful to see them. Just a suggestion. And if we were going to ask other departments to use this format, that's certainly something, Jim, that I would want to ask all the departments to do is so we can go line by line. I mean, you can see where the differences are, but you can't always do the math in your head sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the library team? Okay. Don't see any. Thank you, Mary Ann and trustees for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be following up if we have any other questions.
Okay, thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Thanks, Mary.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night. Okay. All right. So I think what we should do is talk about the preliminary school budget documents that Susie collected and shared. So Susie, I was thinking I might project just because you sent us 3 different versions of the budget. Actually, before I put anything on the screen, do you want to just kind of quickly explain? I know you had a bunch of notes that explained it, but in case folks didn't have a chance to totally absorb that, kind of what the 3 different documents represent.
I didn't print out what I said, and I better go over to that email and print it out, because the
Okay.
details are hard to keep track of. So I'll be printing that out right now.
Okay.
Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to share
There's that.
the full budget, and let's see, what am I share screen? Okay. There we go. So I'll tell you what I sort of what I interpreted those 3 different documents as representing, which is here we have a full budget that we're looking at right now, and that includes 2 very significant drivers of that explain what is a $183,000 increase. One being that we have an out of district placement, a special education placement that has kind of staggering costs, to be honest. I was like a little bit blown away by kind of what that costs a district to place one student, outside of the district, in terms of their tuition and transportation, is a pretty significant number. But anyway, so there's that factor, and then it's, from what I think I understood, there is a role, an adjustment counselor role, that has been funded at the elementary school, at least last year, maybe for going on a couple of years, I can't remember, has been funded with ESSER funds, and there is an interest and a desire to make that role a permanent role that's funded through the general operating budget for the school. Is that correct?
Yes, and
Okay, so
the position is split with Leverett, and that piece of the funding is not clear yet.
okay, got it. So that's why it's a half
Yep.
FTE, because that's getting applied to our budget, because the other half will be shared with Leverett. Okay, so that person will literally spend 2.5 days per week at one school, and then shift to the other, back and forth. Okay, got it. All right. So my understanding of the 2 other documents then was that one of them showed the budget with that previously ESSER funded adjustment counselor role pulled out, and then a third version of the budget that pulled out that adjustment counselor half FTE and the out of district placement, kind of showing, I think probably meant to show how large a component of this overall increase in the budget is attributable to those 2 factors. Does that sound right? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, got it.
And I just want to say that where we see the impact of an out of district placement, lets us remember that education is very expensive. It is expensive. It's not just our teachers, or it's expensive to educate children. And these are specialized services, and they are necessary. So yes, you're looking at one single student out on a strand, sort of. And it lets you know that education is expensive, and our obligation.
Yeah, so for people who didn't sort of pull this out, that cost is $58,000 for that student's tuition, and plus $32,250 for their transportation costs. So what is that? Basically $90,000, right?
Right.
Roughly, yeah. Which in the scheme of $2.7 million budget, it's a big number. All right, Jim Walton, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess that was really my question. I'm trying to understand or digest. This is make sure I understand what this student, it's a student that's going to a out of district
Yes.
school?
Yes, and I think, I assume, Susie, you should correct me if I'm wrong, this is a student that requires specialized services that are not available at our school. Is that fair to?
Yeah, and
Is
one
that right?
other caution, maybe is the right word. In another town where they had an out of district student placement, it became too discussed. Too much detail came out. And in these small schools, that is not a helpful thing. So on their heading, they were calling it, I don't know what they were calling it. They had a term and I didn't understand. It was the out of district. They called it other schools. Yes, some children need a program that is highly specialized, and it's not possible to do that in the general public school. And so this person has that.
Okay, so this is like so this is when we say out of district, this is a specialized education. Those terms mean the same thing. Out of district means a specialized education.
It means something we cannot offer in our school. It's out of our school, out of our school's means.
Okay, and 58,000 of it is related to the actual education, and then there's 32,000 of transportation
Correct.
for 1 year for a student.
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
So I think just kind of overall here, this budget proposes a $182,962 increase over FY24. Okay, so of that roughly 183,000, roughly 90,000 of it is this
half of it
placement that we've just been discussing. Right. And then $40,000 of that increase are allocated for this half an FTE for this adjustment counselor that is being moved to the operating budget that has previously been funded through ESSER funding, which is no longer available. So between those two things, that's like $130,000 of this $280,000 increase. All right, George, and then Bob.
A couple things. This cost, I don't know, we don't know the specifics about this particular student, but it's the first year we've seen this in a while. This could be a recurring cost, so that's something we definitely have to think about. If it's a student in the first grade, it could happen for 6 more years. So 5 more years after this year. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I've always advocated that school choice, well, before I talk about that, remember that, and Becky can probably speak to this better than I can, there's a circuit breaker out there from DOE, Bessie, that will reimburse us for a substantial portion of this out-of-district cost. We get that money after this fiscal year is over. So when we're talking about funding this, we need to get a handle on what that would be. And it might make sense to use free cash for that portion of the operating budget.
That's interesting, George. So some portion of both the transportation and tuition costs we will be reimbursed for, but we won't know what those amounts are until probably after the fiscal year?
Yeah, I don't know how they're
Or fiscal-
calculated. The
Okay.
formula's changed, but yeah, AJ, since you've been on the finance committee, we've never encountered this, but it's certainly something we've seen
Right.
in the past.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
we know that it's out there. It still is out there. So when we're
That's
talking about funding the elementary school budget, I think we should consider that, take that into account. I don't
So-
know how we can make that determination. Maybe the superintendent or somebody in the school, maybe somebody in administration at Union 28 can help us with that.
Okay.
But it's
So
substantial.
so under this scenario, George, just so I can wrap my head around this, what this would mean is we would have essentially a warrant article at town meeting that is asked to utilize free cash, a transfer of free cash to fund the costs
Operating.
for this student, and then at some point we'll receive some reimbursement amount, which would then be applied right back to free cash.
Right, exactly.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, and
All
so if we can get a handle on that, that would make sense. That might make sense to do
I
that.
think we need to not worry or work it out among ourselves. I think this is a question that goes to Caitlin. And first of all, I believe the student is already in Shutesbury. But I think Becky wants to speak. I'll let her.
Wait a minute, I think
Sure.
my hand first.
Excuse me, I just want to caution everyone, I'm sorry to go ahead of you, Bob. I just want to caution, like Susie did in the beginning, this, this is something we have to talk about in a very careful manner and not
Mhm.
pry into the specifics. We will be
Mhm.
given that, I already have some of the specifics, but it's not to be shared on a YouTube video that will be permanent part of the world. There needs to be sensitivity to the family and individuals involved. And this discussion has to be very carefully done.
So
Okay.
I think what we need to do is have Caitlin Sheridan walk us through
Yeah.
the flow of money. And I will ask that as a question. I'll send that to her as a question so that the
Mhm.
FinCom will know
Yeah.
how the money moves.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, so
Can I
my
speak,
first,
please? Christ.
I'm still talking.
Oh, wait a
Bob,
minute.
we're just-
but Bob, we're just trying to get some clarity on
Yeah,
a
but people are
specific
cutting
issue that
the queue, that's all, you know.
Yeah. No,
so-
that's, Bob, I was still have one other point and then I'm done. So, and then another option that it's something I've talked about in the past, something to think about for funding these two lines, the 32 and the 58, the transportation, the program is, I've always thought that this is a good place for the school choice money. The school choice money to me was kind of like a reserve we could have when these big spikes showed up, because historically sped spikes show up, and it was a way to me, it was a way to fund them because we could use that as a reserve. So it's just food for thought when we get to the funding. How are we going to balance the budget later on this year? I think those are things I think we should consider. That's it.
Okay, Bob and then Jim.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
basically wanted to reinforce what George said and remind the committee that we did do something very similar to this a few years ago. I'm not sure how many years ago it was. We had it presented to us a very large expense for transporting a student, a special needs student. And it was going to be, it ought to be a recurring expense. So we knew, we had general outline provided to us, as George suggested, we try to get a grip on this. We had an outline about how long this expense would be a cost to us. And we then funded it from free cash for, I think, 1.5 years or something like that, because we knew it was a temporary expense. It was an extraordinary expense, and it could be funded through free cash and not have to tamper with the operating budget of the school because it was a special circumstance. I think this could be possibly approached this way. I don't know what is the proper way to discuss something where we don't have any information. I don't know what the limits of what I can say, but it does find it frustrating. I understand the need for privacy and for people, but when we're talking about a lot of money, it's kind of nice to know what you're spending it on. And that's a little frustrating. But I do think that approach of using cash is a very reasonable one for something which is not likely to be a permanent expense for the school. Again, it would be nice for us to find out how long this expense would recur, but that would be useful information. I don't know if that's possible. But again, and the school choice, you know, for using school choice money for, it's similar, I think, in principle to using cash. If it's not a recurring expense, why not put the money from that account against it? And as far as the last point I'll make is in terms of the teacher who's going to be half funded in the budget, it does go against our policy of a level funded budget. So it has to be defended by the school committee as a necessary and essential thing to do for us to consider increasing the services that we provide there.
Okay, Jim Hemingway, then Becky, then Susie.
I know this.
I got my hand got eliminated there.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Jim.
I don't know
Walter,
where it
didn't
went.
see it up. Okay. Well, let's go to Jim Hemingway. If you don't mind, Jim Walton, we'll
Yeah.
go Jim Hemingway, Becky, Susie, and then you.
No problem.
All right. Jim?
Yeah. I know this is an unusual and non-reoccurring, we hope, expense, but why throw free cash at it when in fact the school will have to pay this bill from their budget? And then we'll presumably go and turn around and try to get a grant or whatever to, you know, to cover at least some of the cost of it from the state. It seems to me it's all sort of within the budgetary area of, you know, that the school is managing. I don't know why we have to get involved with free cash and with you know, special warrants at town meeting and things like that.
Okay, Becky?
I just want to remind George and Bob that whether whether choice funds are applied to this budget item is under the sole discretion of the school. Discussions about it are fine, but at the end of the day, the finance committee has no authority over the choice funds and cannot utilize them as a revenue source without the commitment from the school committee to do so.
Susie?
And I want to clarify that we asked for level services, not level funding. And I feel we're fortunate when we get a budget that's level funded, but the services to provide an adjustment counselor, which was part of the ESSER funding because they knew that this was going to be an effective COVID and we needed an adjustment counselor, is still a service that's needed. That we will roll it into they will roll it into their operating budget is not an increase of services.
Jim Walton?
Yeah. As far as this is more along the lines of how to fund this. There was some kind, I think it was on Bob, your side, that we would do this out of free cash. I have a real concern about setting a precedent where we're using free cash to manage the budget. My understanding with George's comment was more about the piece of this expenditure that we would expect state funding or state support on. That piece I can understand the putting some free cash towards, but the concept of just establishing a precedent to use free cash to fund the budget is a concern to me.
Right. Okay, I think we're going to George.
Yeah,
And then Susie, do you have a new question or
Nope,
comment?
sorry. Sorry,
No,
I'll
no
lower
problem.
my
George.
hand.
two things. So yeah, follow up on what Jim just said. That's correct. I'm only talking about funding the portion of that we can expect to get back from the state. But, you know, I would just say, somebody said we could be setting a bad precedence here, but actually we've set the precedence many times when an expense is not a long-term recurring expense in a budget. We have used free cash to cover it. The difficulty here is we don't really know how long this will happen for, but it is going to drop out of the budget someday. So just throwing that out there. But I raised my hand because I want to ask Susie. Becky, I'm very much aware that it's not up to us how that funds get used. The reason I raise it is I really want to ask Susie, when the school committee is talking about this particular item in the funding, would they consider that this might be an appropriate way to use the school choice funds? I know it's, when Dan Hayes was on the committee, he talked to us and he said he would work with us in terms of setting a policy. That's fine. I appreciated that, but I just like the school to consider that because I do think that's an appropriate way to use it and a helpful way to use it when we have spikes in their budget. We don't want to fund a budget and have it built in our budget and knowing that part of that cost is going to fall out someday. We really want to mitigate that.
Susie?
So there is a page on the full draft budget. The last page does show the choices around school choice, and they mentioned that some of the school choices money is meant to try to help cover positions, and I think this is I haven't looked at their recent balance, but I do believe they're spending pretty close to what they get. So
It looks like it.
I can ask them some of the thoughts about this. In some ways, the rolling the adjustment counselor into the budget was one of the threads from last year. If it was going to be a reoccurring cost, it shouldn't be outside the budget. And so now the adjustment counselor and the paraeducator are rolled into the operating budget. Whether there's any other ones that can be rolled in, I don't know, but there's a lot around school counselors and adjustment counselors in the press right now, and mental health issues. And so will that go away at some point? Maybe, but it's a necessary thing. And they mentioned that the school gets really high marks for its programs and for its scores and stuff. And they believe the support is needed to continue in a positive direction.
Susie, I don't think I realized when I reviewed this that, did you say that both of these roles, the FTE for the adjustment counselor and this full FTE for a paraeducator, are being applied to the general operating budget
I know
for FY25?
Yeah, I was just gonna go back and see if I could find did I write down the line? Oh, maybe I wrote down the line. Did I? No, I didn't write it in, but I think the para is in there, although the para, I mean, there's a lot of information embedded in some of these numbers, like, is this an extra person?
Right.
They have to, so I'm not positive if that's in there.
In your list of sort of follow-up questions for Caitlin, can you clarify if our general operating budget for FY25 includes an additional paraeducator role?
Yep, I will clarify that.
Okay. So I should have mentioned at the beginning of this discussion that sort of like our main goal for this meeting was to give Susie some questions, like any questions, any kind of clarifying questions that we want her to pose to Caitlin in advance of their meeting with us. So I think we've got a couple already, but are there other questions, other sort of clarifications or additional information we would like from the school? So I see Bob's hand up. I think you're muted, Bob.
Thanks, Susie. I wanted to ask the school committee for a explanation or description of their policy on how choice funds are spent. Let me just give you a little, before I be quiet, and I will be in a moment. you know, when I was first introduced to how their policy, which wasn't a written policy, but it was explained to me that they were using it for non-recurring expenses and for special requirements that they had outside of their normal operating budget. And I see now that they have a full-time teacher that's funded by Choice, and other permanent operating expenses are funded by Choice. So that's transmigrated substantially. And now we're going to, we're taking the ESSER money, which is another off revenue source that was not considered to be part of our budgeting process, is being eliminated in some of those positions. I'm not sure if all the positions or some of the positions will be proposed to be part of the future permanent operating budget and permanent positions in our budget. And, you know, I just saw the ESSER was money that was available for the special circumstances surrounding the COVID. And it's natural that people want to hang on to these people because they're useful in the school. But is it something we want to support to continue supporting this line in the operating budget when it was meant to be a temporary thing? That's my question to the committee. We have to recommend up or down whether we support this budget. As Becky tells us all the time, we don't have any right to drill into all the details. It's up to the school to spend the money as they see fit. But we do have the right to tell them the amount of dollars they have to play with. So I'm concerned about these lines. I'm concerned about those amounts. And I'd like to know, what is the school choice policy? What's the money? How is this money managed? That's something that Dan Hayes and you and the committee were working on last year. Is there some resolution to that question?
I sent it out last year. I'll send it out again. It's in writing. And we saw it last year and we can see it again.
I'm gonna just share it right now. April.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the effects of the pandemic on our school population are going to reverberate for many years. You know, it's not like the pandemic's over and the need for special services is gone. You know, it's with us for a period of time, and we should respect that.
Becky.
I've just been reading through the special ed formula for reimbursement claims under the circuit breaker. And one perspective I just wanted to share with you guys, that oftentimes a sped child could, you know, this is a very, for the tuition piece at 58,000. I just want you aware that our threshold of that you subtract from that amount is 49,494 in the current year, and will likely go up. So the way it works is 75% reimbursement of the tuition minus the threshold. So this is many times sped placements can be up to $300,000 annually. So I don't anticipate more than, I mean, I think we could anticipate less than 50% reimbursement on this if the threshold is subtracted from both the tuition and the transportation.
So it would be 90 minus 49, and then the difference of that, 75% of it would be reimbursable.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
All right, that's helpful. Okay.
Becky, just so I'm clear, 75% of that, meaning the total we were going to be reimbursed, is something like 38 or 40% of the total cost.
Well, it's 90. So
Yeah,
so
it's for the tuition. It's really
75% of half.
It says 75% of that amount, say the 58 minus the 49, say 8,000, you know, 75% of that.
$1,000.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
the transportation piece, I think, is handled separately. And as you all know, we've never gotten 100%, although that's where what we were guaranteed at some point in time. It's in statute, but I don't think it's ever happened.
But we've had some big ones in the past. I mean, we've had some We had some that were over $40,000. I don't remember how they were calculated.
No, well, if
just-
you go back in time, back in 2004, the threshold was $29,000.
Yeah, okay, that's what it is.
So it's been increasing, I think 4.5% a year or something.
Yeah, they've been dialing back. So Susie, Aaron Saunders, conversation about the way this Sped is helping us with Sped.
Mhm.
It's always a tough one, but at least something comes back.
One thing I appreciate about the budget that they gave us, just to throw this out, is I do appreciate the notes in the right-hand margin.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And getting it ahead.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah,
yes. And tell them to keep working on it.
yeah, I mean, I gotta say, in some ways, like, I think Caitlin's work on this, I think is, I think I might prefer it, prefer to the old format that we used to get, but anyway, that's neither here nor there.
You certainly improved it.
Yeah,
It's definitely
okay.
better.
Susie,
And I want to reiterate that they put in a cost of living contract adjustment, but the negotiations will begin. I think the committee members have been assembled, and I believe the negotiations will either begin the end of this month or the beginning of next. So look across the valley, read the newspaper. These are challenging times, and so we don't know how the contract will go. For the towns that have lost their superintendents in this process, our superintendent's already going to leave, so that's easy. So hopefully we will reach an agreement. And so when I saw this local budget, I said, yep, and we're going to see some of that at the region too. Some of these same issues are going to come there. Loss of ESSER, managing the impact of a contract, figuring out the staffing that works, and support for mental health. These are all things that are happening in every school and in our town and in our region.
So Susie, you said this, so the 3.49% salary increase, that's just that's a plugged in number. That's not, it could be higher or lower,
Absolutely.
depending on the outcome of the negotiations.
That's right.
Okay, well, I think that's important to know.
Yep.
When's the expectation that gets sorted out, the timing?
Well, Amherst took years. I don't think we have had a history of cooperative or collaborative negotiations in Shutesbury. And I don't know. I don't think they have an idea yet how long it'll take. And while that's going on, they're trying to figure out their superintendent, how many towns they're going to have, blah, blah, blah. It's very hard.
What's the word from Irving, Susie?
I asked if there was any timeline. No, there is not a timeline. So I read the paper, but I'm not watching very closely. I don't know where Irving's at.
all right. Any other questions for Susie to take back to the school committee or the finance director? All right, I don't see any. Susie, do you feel like you have everything you need from us to?
Yeah, I think
Have your
she's going to
next-
walk
yeah.
me through a little bit about the out of district placement and the circuit breaker and what kind of expectation we have. I don't think, I mean, the privacy issue's a big one. And so, we might not get to know how many years.
Yeah.
But we will make a financial plan to meet it. That's where it's at. But we're going to find out some of the nuts and bolts in that plan.
Mhm.
And then finding out about the para educator and finding out what their projection is about the choice positions. I mean, watching them roll the ESSER position into the operating budget felt like a clarity that people have been asking for. Now we'll see if any of the ones in choice are likely to move into the operating or are likely to not be sustained positions, and they'll and we have their policy. So you saw it on the screen. If you want me to send it to you again, I can dig it out and send it to you again. Or maybe actually, AJ, you found it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
you can send
The
it out
only-
again.
I
Okay.
mean, I think the only concern I would have is the file name on the document that I pulled up has the word draft in it. So I don't know if they like if there were further changes to that, or if that's just how I had it
Yeah,
worded. But-
okay. Well, I have one that
I'll-
doesn't say draft, so I will
Okay.
send it out.
All right, well, then if you don't mind sharing that, just in case that's a different version of it, yeah. Okay. All right, I think we should move on to discussing the
The warrants.
special town meeting warrant articles. Is that all right? Let me pull up the warrant document.
Is this what Becky sent out to us before the
Yes,
meeting
I think-
tonight?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Where did it go? Oh, here. Oh, that's not-
I have
Oh,
it
here we
in,
go. Okay. No, sorry, it took me a minute. All right. So, Becky, how do we do we just want to kind of go through this article by article and see if folks
good
have
to me,
questions?
and I can jump in. I think the first one, we're all clear on the issues.
Mhm.
Does anybody have any questions about Article 1 to see if the town will vote to transfer $50,000 to the legal expense line from stabilization or free cash? Any questions? Yep, Becky.
I just want to say that, so when we leave it in stabilization or free cash, that means that, and I have to correct this, that this has to be, requires a 2/3 vote, because the potential is that stabilization could be chosen, and if so, I've got to have the most, the most strict.
All right, that's good to know.
But
George. Oh,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to explain that
no, no.
if you guys are in a position before voting to discuss and decide the source, we can amend that article.
George?
Well, I can address that. I didn't raise my hand for that point, but our balances for capital stabilization is $166,000. That's $100 more than we
Mhm.
thought it would be when we did our analysis for annual town meeting, because the school roof ended up not needing any funding for capital stabilization, and then regular stabilization is 110. So we got $476,000 in stabilization, and then of course free cash is $1,094,000. So if we're going to have that conversation, I'll be ready to have it. I've got these numbers to talk about, but it certainly seems like free cash, there's a lot more of it, and it could survive this better than the stabilizations. The reason I raised my hand was I was not at the last meeting. So I'm assuming, Becky, that maybe you had a description of what the 50,000 is for. If you could give me the 30-second description.
The select board has recently, this year we're handling a lawsuit with Coles, which is adding to the legal burden. We have 2 lawyers that are working on this. I think to date, it hasn't been, to date, I think they've spent about $15,000 or $18,000. But we are getting to the point where they're going to have to hire experts and put in more work. So that is, so probably probably around 25,000 or more of this will go towards that 25 to 35 to 40. We also have our regular ongoing permitting issues and just regular daily personnel issues that require legal counsel as well as contracting issues. So to have, have $10,000 left to address those issues, 10 to 15, but the big lift here is going to be caused by the lawsuit.
So the lawsuit that the judge threw our bylaw out, basically invalid, said our bylaw is invalid. So if our bylaw is invalid, then what are we paying and the case is over? What's the next steps in this process?
It's not quite that simple. I mean, so we have three generations of bylaws in play. The January 2023 was the most recent bylaw amendment. That is what has been thrown out. So that being removed takes us back to and people debate whether it was then we had an amendment to the original, I think it was 2021 vote in 2022. That stands, and the original 2021 vote that the town took, even though it's very similar to what was re-voted or amended in 2023, stands at this point. Statutorily, I mean, it stands as far as the state is concerned at this point. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be thrown out as a result of something else. I mean, it would have to, but it's not the one in question right now. So that's still standing and it's still there, and how the town deals with the fact that's what they have and how the lawsuit impacts it is what we will see in the future months.
So it's possible that Coles is still going to be challenging us.
They are challenging us. And
Yeah, on that one that is now currently in effect. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah, just, I wanted to just inform George in case he missed it from last week, we did approve a recommendation to transfer, I think 15,000, Becky, was it?
I did see that, Bob. Thank you. Yeah, it was in the minutes.
And so, yeah, I wanted to ask Becky then, I understand from your description where we stand, I think, what chances there are, how reasonable is this to expect this to be settled sometime so that we don't have to continue throwing money into legal expenses like this? We fighting to the finish here, or are we going to settle this? I mean, it seems like it's going to be a very expensive fight that we're losing so far.
It'll be up to the select board.
Yeah.
Yep. And I
Yeah.
did want to also mention the 15,000, a significant portion of that, I'm not sure how much, will be at least $5,000 will be going towards the Concom bylaw. So there's we have brought in McGregor to review the Concom bylaw. Out of all the attorneys who addressed the regulations, he was most effective and had the most reputable and significant changes and substantive changes. And he is the one who the select board has chosen to review the bylaw that is on this town meeting warrant, article number 3.
Thank you. And I personally just want to also say I support George's idea that we should fund this transfer out of cash. I think that's a good idea. I support it too.
You mean free cash?
Free cash, yes.
AJ,
Okay. Yeah, so I think maybe what I'll do now is just make a motion to for the final to recommend approval of Article 1, amending it to read, to see if the town will vote to transfer $50,000 to the legal expense line from free cash or take any action relative thereto.
Mhm.
I'll second that.
Okay, Susie?
So the following discussion that we're going to have is whether the wording is free cash or stabilization. It's not about the article in itself, right?
Well, I think it could be, right? Because I think we didn't have a motion on the floor that needs to be amended, or it's really, so I think we can just vote to recommend approval of this article as written on the screen right now. I'm just
Not an approval, but the finance
Recommendation.
committee's recommendation.
right, yes.
Sorry to interrupt that.
Well,
Does that make
if it's, there's another, that would also affect the requires 2/3 vote part, right? Because if it's free cash,
Right.
it's only a 50.
Majority.
Right,
Yeah,
and that's
majority.
been changed to majority vote on the warrant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to add my opinion about the overall article, if this is
Please.
the time. Okay.
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah. Towns have an obligation by law to fund education, town government, public safety, roads, etc. We do not have an obligation to fund legal costs that put us in the position of being a test case or establishing case law for a planning board bylaw. And my feeling is we have worked hard to continue to support our budget and our taxpayers, and to undertake an open-ended court case is beyond the purview of a small town. So I do not recommend that we support Article 1.
Okay, George?
So Becky, what's the impact if we don't pay attorneys? We don't hire attorneys for this?
As
Do you
far
know?
as Nicole's
Can you predict?
lawsuit, we have to respond. We are required by law to respond to the suit.
Without lawyers, how would we respond?
I guess you guys can all come into my office and help me do it.
She's gonna do it, yeah.
Okay, any other comments or questions? April and then Jim Walton.
Well, and I do find this confusing, that what has been mulling in my head is that, this seems like an endless money pit over legal things that I don't see a way that we can resolve them. And it's not a finance committee choice to resolve the issue. But I echo, I hadn't thought of it in the way you talked about it, Susie. I echo what you're saying. And if we didn't support this, then I guess we'd be writing case law. I'm not sure what we would be doing, but I feel like we're in an abyss. And I don't see a way out of it.
Jim Walton?
Yeah, I've got this, I'm sort of the same thinking. I'm trying to understand, what's the downside if we decide we're not gonna put up money for legal support? What does that, where does that put us? I'm
Well,
not really clear.
The
Well, to be
downside,
clear, it's not us, right? It's the town is gonna vote whether to fund this
Yeah,
warrant article
yeah.
or not.
Well, yeah.
We're gonna be providing some guidance, but it's ultimately their call.
But yeah, so let's say with the town, if the town decides not to vote for this, where does that put the town?
well,
What's the downside to that?
the only downside I could see, Jim, is that we wouldn't have legal representation to settle the case. I think that we could direct, the town, should have a lively discussion about this at the meeting. I think there's a legitimate point that Susie raises about whether we should be pursuing this or being trapped in a legal fight that doesn't really represent our interests, but it's going to be paid for by us. I think that settling it is what most lawyers usually recommend, and it takes a lawyer to settle it, I think. But the select board are the executives, they're the authorities, we aren't, as Susie pointed out.
Mm.
I hope that they're thinking about settling it. I don't know if that's privileged information. But
Well, what does settling it look like?
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah,
taking a deal, is there still a suit against the town for its 21 bylaw, Becky? Is that what's happening?
the 23.
21, yeah,
23 's
'cause
been
they
filed.
sued, they sued for January and they sued the other one, they sued both, so.
So that would have to be dropped and some settlement would have to be made between the two parties, like about how a new law would be drafted or interpreted or something. That's how I would anticipate it.
Mm. Okay.
George.
So if we didn't fight this, or we gave a very terse response, then we lose this case, and that opens the door for Coles to proceed with their project? Do we know? Is that an accurate assessment? Again, I know I'm being simple.
I apologize, I have privileged information from executive session and I can't quite thread the needle to
Mm.
say much
That's okay.
because of
Yeah, I
that.
don't mean to put you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's understood.
Wow.
All right. Well, guys, we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. We've had some discussion. I think we have to vote, and I think it's I think it's fair to say that we all have some ambivalence about like what to do here. I'll tell you, I don't really see any good options here. I mean, I think I've been assuming that this is one of those things where we have no choice but to pay the bills for legal representation, and I'm not sure that it's appropriate to use this article as a way to kind of direct the select board to move in one direction or the other. I don't know. I don't see a great alternative to passing this, but that's just how I'm looking at it. Bob,
we change the number to like say 25 and say like that's just, you're not having 50 to drop on this case. You're having a smaller number of dollars to drop on this case to resolve it. I mean, I'm just
I
saying.
don't think so, because this is the select board's article, right? I mean, this is what they approved. So,
We can't
yeah,
change
I don't
the
think we
number.
can.
We can only
I don't
ask
think
them
so,
to.
yeah.
They are the ones who
Right, okay,
approve
that makes sense.
and
Yeah.
amend.
Our authority is just limited to this little section which says whether we recommend it or not. Yeah.
Right.
Susie.
I believe as a finance committee, we try to recommend to the select board and to the members of the people that, and to the people that come to the special town meeting, we try to recommend a financial viewpoint. And my viewpoint is that this is an unlimited, an expense that we are not in control of, and it doesn't suit our town. And so I believe we can make a financial, we have a financial position to represent. And so that's why what happens beyond this article on the floor and with the select board is not our purview. But what I believe is important is for us to say, this is not how the finance committee recommends spending town money.
Jim Walton.
Yeah, well, I guess if this was a required, I think someone referred to it as being required. If it was a required expense, then there wouldn't be anything to vote on. If it's required, it's required. There's no vote. So if there's a decision to be made, and based on the information we have right now, I don't see enough information to warrant us proposing or supporting this expenditure. You know, if there's some hidden information that's in whatever closed session or whatever, you know, maybe that would make the case, but we're not privy to that. I think what we are privy to, I don't see the case for supporting it.
I mean, isn't part of the complication here though that this wrapped up in this figure is not a single court case, right? I mean, there are other sort of unique issues going on that have nothing to do with that lawsuit that are running up pretty significant legal bills. And so, like, this is a kind of catch-all transfer that's supposed to be funding our legal expense line because of a number of issues that we're having to pay lawyers to represent the town. April?
Yeah, I guess it's a lot because I have very strong feelings about the whole project to begin with. But I'm wondering, it's sort of echoing, I think what I heard you saying, AJ, is this the way to take the stand? You know, and there's, I think what I'm uncomfortable with is not knowing there's nuances that we don't have some of the information that we need, that we would need on one hand, and on the other hand, this is, I feel like we are getting into this abyss again of money that is going to go towards something that I don't think is helping the town in the long run. But is this the way to, you know, is this the way to take the stand at this particular junction? I'm not sure.
All right, Bob?
I guess I just want to say, I guess I would be tend to reluctantly support this. I'd like to convey at least my personal views to the select board that I'd like to see them bring an end to this process ASAP. But I will not deprive them of the ability to go forward. But you know, this has gone on long enough. There's got to be an end game here, and let's hear what it is. Let's be more transparent about what's going on. That would be my advice to them and my ask from them.
George?
Yeah, here, Bob. And hopefully they will be able to share more on the town floor at that point in time. But this isn't all just the solar lawsuit. And no, and I agree with Susie's sentiments. I think she makes a really great point. But I do think that you gotta have legal representation in the situation. And the bottom line is we need to protect the town as well. So I am going to support this. I definitely have reservations about it like the rest of you.
Susie?
As to the question about other legal expenses that are entwined in this 50,000, the original line this year was 40. We moved 15,000 from free cash. I believe that if this case is settled, then if we go beyond the 55,000 in legal, which, think about that, it's not like that a couple of years ago, we could take money out of FinCom reserve again, because I don't anticipate, if we can keep ourselves out of legal jeopardy, that we will need an exorbitant amount. But really, we're at 55,000, and that, I feel like we need to figure out how to solve our problems without going to court.
All right, I guess another thought about, sort of speaking of kind of threading a needle here. So is it appropriate, possible for the finance committee to potentially vote reluctantly to approve this article and at the same time make a plan to articulate some of our concerns as part of the discussion at this special town meeting? And perhaps I mean, perhaps we could choose one or two people who have, I think, made some very good points tonight. I think we can encourage them to sort of speak on behalf of the finance committee at the special town meeting and express some of those concerns. Susie?
I guess when Bob was talking about tell the select board their views, I view that as part of a private citizen, and I have written to the select board and the planning board with my views about pursuing this case and the cost to the town. I think that I would prefer to go to town meeting as an individual to speak, because I don't know the kind of work it would take for us to come to a consensus.
Yeah, I agree.
And try to represent ourselves as a committee. If we take a vote here and I vote against it, it'll say Finance Committee, and it either recommends or not recommends, and it'll list the votes. It'll say how many yeses
Right.
and how many noes. And that's what I feel this article can accomplish. And then when we go to town meeting, we get to speak for our perspectives and not have to, my perspective is coming from the thinking about managing the town and being in a legal morass that I don't feel we can afford. So that's how I see the process, but people might see it differently.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments,
AJ,
discussion?
let's
All right.
vote on this. Let's,
Yeah, we've got a motion on the floor. It's been seconded, so I think we're going to have to vote. So,
Urbanite, aye.
George, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, Urbanite, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, no.
Stein, nay.
Walton, no.
Okay. So we have
We're
voted
split.
4 to 3 to recommend this article.
That'll
And I
show the
think
town,
Pretty good.
yeah,
that'll show our town our
and I
benevolence.
think,
Mhm.
yeah, I think Susie, I'm just speaking individually, I would encourage you and Bob and George, whoever, I mean, I think there have been some important issues raised tonight, and I would encourage you guys to raise them as, speaking for yourselves at town meeting. Okay, let's move on to Article 2. Becky, can you explain what's going on here?
Okay, so Article 2, I apologize. I think I need to write, this section needs to be put in. This is about fees and the giving by statute elected committees and boards the ability to set fees. Right now, since we haven't passed this, the fees in the new Concom regulations are at a standstill. So it will give the ability to elected bodies to set their fees, and it will give the ability for appointed bodies to have their fees confirmed, approved by the select board. Donna recommended this, I understand, in 2009, and it wasn't followed up on. Somehow it was the finance committee actually that talked about it, and we have notes about, but never came back to finalize the vote. So it's a necessary statute to enable elected bodies to set fees without going to annual town meeting.
Okay, but those fee schedules still have to be approved by the select board?
Only if those fees are brought forward by an appointed body.
Okay, got it. Okay,
But
Anybody
I
have-
believe the way it works, the first time the fees are set, I'm sorry, I'm not as. So the first time the fees are set, they go to annual town meeting by the planning board or another elected body. But when they change them after that, they still have to abide somewhat by statute. They can't, like the fire department can't set a fee that's higher than statute without a home rule petition. So it gives a bit more freedom. All fees still, I believe, have to be originally set by annual town meeting, but any changes that they adopt after that, have to be done, can only be done if we adopt this section.
got it.
Okay.
Okay, any comments or questions, George?
So Becky, these fees that we're talking about, they're fees that are usually collected to cover the cost of the departments, and they're not in the budget,
Right,
or
there,
costs that are not in the budget.
They're not revolving.
Well, some are, like the Concom fees, are they in the budget?
They have a residuum.
Yeah,
Just
they,
wondered, bottom line is I'm wondering why the finance committee needs to make a recommendation on this.
because it's financial.
But it's financial, but it doesn't affect the operating budget or the cash balances and free cash or stabilizations.
It could impact the operating budget. I think depending what the planning board were to do with their fees.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
So
Okay,
in a motion to approve this?
all right,
Yeah.
I'll second that. George, you want to start?
yes,
Voting?
Arvanitis, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, I.
Cashew, aye.
Mosher, aye.
Stein, aye.
Walton, I.
I should say to recommend approval, yeah.
Okay, so,
That's unanimous.
Yep.
Yeah.
yep, unanimous vote.
I am gonna put 7-0 in there just to,
Yeah.
Kristen.
And on Article 1, it was 4-3, yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm.
Moving down, Article 4, to see if the town will vote to transfer $9,000 from free cash or stabilization to fund mitigation and testing for gasoline at fire station in response to DEP letter, or take any action relative thereto. Okay, Becky, is there any background or explanation?
DEP, we had a resurgence, a reoccurrence of gasoline, in one well at the fire station. They've been testing right now it's showing up in one well, but to confirm that it's not spreading, we need to do a series of tests at the surrounding wells and go back and forth with DEP filings. I have received a quote for $9,000 from Ty and Bond, who is the official LSP that has been working on this site since June.
Okay,
And this is to request for the funding to do this work. If our LSP, Jeffrey Arps, was at a recent select board meeting where he outlined his strategy and his hopes that he could preserve the temporary solution by proving that now all parties that could have been impacted by a potential for gasoline in their water all now have
PFAS.
poets
filters.
and are protected because they are the PFAS poets that we installed also protect against gasoline. So his strategy, hopefully, if it works, we will with this be able to reestablish the status that we had sustained for a number of years.
okay, Susie and then Bob.
Can we just go ahead and edit now? And I suggest we go with free cash and then it'll just be a majority vote.
Mhm. Right, yeah, I think that makes sense when we get to a motion. Bob,
Yeah, I just want to say, we are obligated to fund this because we need to respond to the directives that we've gotten from the state DEP. So I don't think there's any matter debate that we have to fund this, so we have to recommend this. Because as far as the strategy of the engineer goes, that's a different matter. Whether that works or not, we still have to go to the preliminary testing phase.
Yep.
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, can we proceed to a vote?
This is the second
Jim.
testing phase, just so you're clear. It's not preliminary.
Okay,
It's the what phase, Becky?
The second phase of testing, we did,
but we're required to do it.
yes.
I'll make a motion, we approve it.
Second,
Okay.
I recommend it.
I recommend cash.
Right, so just to be clear, we're voting on an article that says to see if the town will vote to transfer $9,000 from free cash to fund mitigation and testing for gasoline at fire station in response to DEP letter.
Yeah.
Is that accurate, Bob? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. All right, George,
Arvin, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, I.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, I.
Stein, I.
Walton, I.
Okay, so Finance Committee recommends 7-0. Okay. Article 5, this is an MLP.
Yeah, this is an easy one. This is an easy one. We can all vote for this.
Jim, is there any explanation?
Well, the explanation is
No.
merely, we need a town meeting to approve the transfer of the certified retained earnings that that's a result of, the budget over to the emergency reserve fund. It's just what we have to do this or have done this year after year. So it's just simple as
Okay.
that.
It's just being
Okay.
done earlier with this opportunity of the January meeting. It's regularly
Yeah,
done.
yeah, yeah.
And,
So we usually do this at end of year town meeting. Okay.
So,
All right. George, well, any comments or questions before we vote?
Did we make a motion?
Do we need
Uh,
that one there? Is this one part of it?
Yeah,
It's
I took the article as supplied. That's the action they want to do, and this is
There's
not
been
the
multiple,
format they've used at annual town meetings, so I
Okay.
took out what I had written and left theirs and put theirs
Okay.
in.
All right, great.
they probably have multiple things in the past.
All right. I don't see any hands up. So George, you want to start the vote?
There's a motion on the floor. Okay, Arvin, aye.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I don't know if there is a motion. I'll make a motion
Mhm.
to recommend Article 5.
Second,
I'll second it.
Okay.
Arvin,
Now,
aye.
George.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, I.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, I.
Stein, I.
Walton, I.
All right, so that Finance Committee recommends vote is 7-0. All right, Article 6.
What's the number, Becky?
Okay, I'm sorry. It was a long afternoon, guys. The number, I'm afraid, is $40,000.
There we go. And we have a culvert.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
And-
that's-
And
And should that be just free cash and not stabilization?
that would be my.
Or should it be stabilization?
Yeah, I think stabilization would be good for this.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't think it's gonna have a problem passing, and I think that's where it should come from, shouldn't it?
well,
It's really a capital
Oh,
investment.
well,
Mhm.
This is not, you're not talking about capital. Do you want capital stabilization?
Sure, why not?
well, capital stabilization has 166 and stabilization has 310. So if you take it out of capital stabilization, right, you're gonna go down to, well, here, then you're gonna go down to 125. So, versus, you're still gonna have 436 in stabilization funds. You're just gonna have not a lot in your capital stabilization, which is usually the account you use for big items.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Jim
is.
Hemingway.
Yep. Becky, this is to cover the cost of the trap rock, correct? That's what most of this money is being used for?
30,000 of it is
30.
for the, we're talking about the 1.5 trap rock, the inch and a
Yeah.
half that was added to the base. So yeah, the majority is for that, and small part is for 4,300 is for the paving, because the paving was 20 feet longer because the condition of the paving that was left in the job site with all the movement of the large cranes and machinery over time, they ended up going back 10 feet on each side
Oh.
and milling that, and so we had additional paving, and we also ended up having additional guardrails that were added. Plus the additional trap rock that was used on the south outlet
Yeah.
for the foundation, to prevent erosion.
Because there's so much wet springs and stuff over there. That sounds fine to me.
It's a done
Glad it's
deal.
over with.
Paid for. So the question is,
George?
do we want to pay for it from free cash and then actually implicitly fund the stabilization, or do we, because that seems like a low number. We're pulling out of the stabilization versus the free cash, which is amply funded.
Well, the one thing I would say is, last year at annual town meeting, we had 3 warrant articles that we funded from cash related to the culvert. And the culvert costs due to delay in the project was $60,000. And that was out of capital stabilization. And then we had 2 other items totaling 70,000, which were for the permitting for the drawdown and for the consulting for the environmental permits. We funded those out of free cash. So the idea of using capital stabilization is consistent with the costs of the culvert itself. In fact, it was called costs due to delays in the project, which is really what this amount is as well, the 40,000. So I think, I tend to agree with Bob. Free cash is $1,094,000. After the first 2 warrant articles, it'd go down to $1,035,000. Then we'd be at $995,000. But I think capital stabilization is consistent with what we've done in the past.
Only thing I'd say about that, George, is that we should have had a transfer into those accounts, but we didn't get around to that this special town meeting. I don't know if we can do it in the spring or not.
Why not?
Susie?
We'll have to do the analysis. It'll depend on what why not? The only thing I would say is we'll have to see what the capital requests are for the year and take that into account. And then we can look at this, we'll do the usual analysis, right? With the spreadsheet with all the items on it. We can decide what's the right thing to do at that point.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation.
So where do we want to fund this from?
I suggest,
Susie,
I suggest we fund it from capital stabilization. I think labeling matters to people. It is a capital cost, and it's finishing out a project that had capital stabilization involved in it.
I'll buy that.
any concerns about that?
No.
Only
No.
it requires a 2/3 vote, and if we don't get them, we're back to the square one.
We'll get it.
We'll get it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. All right. So I'll make a motion for the Finance Committee to recommend Article 6 to see if the town will vote to transfer $40,000 from capital stabilization to fund the cost overrun at the Locks Pond Culvert project, or take
I'll
any
second it.
action relative thereto. All right, George seconds. Any other discussion? George, you want to start the vote?
Arvanitis, aye.
Grove's eye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Stein, aye.
Walton, I.
Okay,
Right.
Finance Committee recommends, vote is 7-0.
I would
Becky,
vote
you
to
got
support
everything
any
you need
article
from
not-
us?
Yes, thank you so much for getting this done tonight. It's going to the select board on the 19th. We have some wiggle room if anything comes up, but it likely will be posted after the select board meeting unless something changes.
Great. Okay, I think,
It's
guys, thanks for
8:47.
hanging in there for, I know, a little bit of an extra long meeting. So, I think the only items left on our agenda are, committee updates, project updates. I can briefly tell you that capital planning met yesterday, I think yesterday, right?
Monday.
Bob?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah. And we are in the process of arranging meetings with 5 departments that are submitting capital project requests. Something from the library, we don't know what that is. The details are forthcoming. You heard tonight about police cruiser, and now we know 2 speed boards. Highway department is requesting generator and a storage container, if I'm not mistaken. Again, none of the details on any of these have been discussed within capital planning, but just to give you a preview. The school is gonna be requesting some funds for exterior painting work. And the fire department is gonna be requesting funds for installation of a water tank at the elementary school, which you heard about at the last meeting. And then next FY26 will be when the paving is done at the school, which I think we've talked a little bit about in the committee. I think I got everything covered. Becky?
Um, Lenny is requesting, I think he's gonna be requesting the repair of the pump. I think that was his top priority. So that's what he's moving ahead with this year.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, and then they're, it's not that they're
The
not,
pump on the check.
I think the water tank is gonna take more planning. I'm not sure if he's uncertain if he'll be able to put together information for that this year or not.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. So maybe the repair pump and not the water tank will be their
Yeah.
project for this year. Okay, got it. All right, Jim Hemingway?
Yes, the water to, the $30,000 water tank. Becky, have we gotten any confirmation from the insurance company that this will actually reduce the cost of insurance?
I'm
Yet?
sorry, Jim, I haven't gotten a quote from them
Yeah,
yet.
because that certainly would make a big difference, at least in my support for it.
I,
It would be important to know whether it does make a difference. It's going to make a difference
Right.
For
in our
reminding
insurance.
me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
All right. Jim Walton?
Yeah, I think just a question for Becky. Lenny had asked for a, he hasn't been able to find anything for the long range, the 10-year capital plan. The most recent one that Walter would have put together. Do you have that, or does the capital planning team?
I think, I think just sitting down with Lenny and the capital plan, we can fit what he has done into that. There's no reason to unearth the 15-year-old information or 13-year-old information. I never saw a copy of that. I understand from, I mean, there some of his early notes. What he asked for originally, is on the capital plan, the versions, 10-year-old versions. But Lenny has a really good understanding of how to move forward, so I'm not sure why going backwards.
Not going backwards, but he was just looking for the most recently submitted version of the capital plan for the fire
He
department.
never submitted one. Walter
No.
never submitted it. He sat down with Joe Markarian and had a conversation. Joe took all his input and put it in the capital plan.
Hey, Jim?
Maybe I should ask it a different way. So the capital planning team puts together a 10-year plan or a 15-year plan.
25.
Does somebody have the most recent version of that?
I
That would
have the
include
most-
That would include the fire
Yeah.
department.
Yes,
We-
I hold
Because
that.
Lenny, that would be helpful for Lenny is to help him understand what's already out there. So he knows what the base case is.
Yep, I
going
had a
forward.
discussion with Lenny and I told him I would share it with him. I have it.
Okay, so he knows you're gonna get
And
that to him.
it's handed out at annual town meeting. It's not like it's a public document that's been floating around, but I'll sit down and once Lenny is able to leave the house again, I'll sit down with him. And
Got it. Okay, any other committee updates or other business that folks need to raise tonight?
I can talk
Okay.
about personnel real quick.
Sure.
There's currently 3 openings that we're advertising for. Well, let me go back. Well, there's openings in the highway department. We think we found somebody. The superintendent thinks he's found somebody who's working on getting his commercial driver's license. They've hired 2 part-timers, one of which this person is one who will be available for plowing. So they're in pretty good shape going into the winter as far as maintaining the roads during storms. And then we're working on a land use clerk position where we're going to be looking at the job description for that. And then there's the assistant town clerk, which we're advertising for right now. So those are open positions. And then April has worked on a classification study. Classification study is what we use to determine the pay grades for each of the positions in town. And so we're making we're updating it, and we might have more on that in the future, but we'll see the final update in the next one. We're also working on updating the employee handbook, and that's Melissa's job, and she's going to have that done soon. And in the future, we're going to be analyzing the salaries in Shutesbury versus Franklin County to determine if the method we've been using for the COLAs is really the best method. See how it's shaking out and how we're shaking out relative to other towns. So personnel board's been busy.
Was there one
Thank
more
you.
thing?
I'm sorry.
No, I was just thinking, was there one more thing? No, I think that was it.
Oh, there probably is. I
Okay.
don't. Policies and procedures, no.
No. But the alignment, our aligning, continuing to make sure that our salaries are aligned with the average in Franklin County.
Yeah, that'll be a part of the COLA analysis. Yes.
Yep, we'll see how that goes. Been fun.
Okay.
Time to adjourn.
All right. So our next meeting,
I think Jim is
just want to make
getting
sure we're all on the
serious.
same.
Next meeting.
Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Our next meeting is going to be January 2nd. We're not meeting on the 26th, right? That was an open date on our calendar. If it's okay with you all, I would really.
The
Not
select
sure I'm
board
gonna be
meets on the 2nd.
Really?
Oh,
How did that
how did we do that?
Yeah, I thought you
we.
moved
Is-
around that, but
Okay, so 1/9/24.
Because somehow we got off schedule then, because the 12th, every 2 weeks would have been the December 12th, then December 26th. Oh no, maybe January 2nd that's 1 week after.
Yeah, it would have been January 9th.
Well, there
How
we
did
go.
we do that? All right.
And
All
that
right.
means we have to change the we have to change all these dates.
Oh my goodness.
Well, we can
All right,
Maybe it's a leap
um,
year. If it's a leap year, can we? No.
What is leap year? It's not.
It might be a leap year. Yeah, I think it is. 24,
Oh,
yeah.
God, we're getting punchy. So when are we meeting again? Because I think we're
All
done.
right, so that means we are not meeting again until January 9th. Is that right?
That's what
That's
that means.
right.
I don't know. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
On deck for that meeting is budget reviews for the treasurer, the assessor. I also need to tell you all that I got a request from the Energy and Climate Action Committee. Michael DiChiara wanted to meet with the FinCom to discuss some, I think, financial implications for some projects or work that they potentially will be pursuing. So I had invited him to January 2nd. I will now see if he's available on January 9th. And I do have an email that I'll be circulating from him that sort of, I think, will be helpful context for all of us.
Okay.
What's that? Oh, that'd be great, George.
Yeah, my only question is what time should I give them, the assessor and the treasurer? 7 and 7:30 or
why don't-
6?
Yeah, let's do, you know what, let's do 7 and 7:30.
Okay.
And then I'll give Michael 8 o'clock.
Becky, do you know who would prefer which times? Ryan doesn't care, right?
I
He's from
would-
home. It's okay. I'll talk to
Yeah,
Leslie tomorrow, actually.
probably do the assessors earlier,
Okay. Got it. That's what I'll do.
but I would suggest trying to start by a quarter of, by 6:45 to 6:15.
Okay, why don't we do 6:45, assessor, treasurer at 7:15?
Yeah,
Okay,
That
you
work?
got it.
Okay.
yeah, just because it's not as late and then you can fill in, did you want ECAC at
7:45.
Yeah,
7:45.
I'll email Michael just to make sure he's available on the night, and I'll tell him 7:45.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Great.
We'll see
Thanks
you
for hanging in
on
there, guys.
Saturday. We'll see you Saturday.
Yes.
and, you
That's
know,
right.
I guess
See you
it feels
Saturday.
like a long space to me, and if this is the season stuff starts to pop up, we might end up having to figure something out, but otherwise we'll see you
Yeah.
on tonight, 16th.
Yeah, if
Yeah,
we
I'll-
need to meet in the interim, let us know.
Right.
Right, I'll be in touch with them.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second,
Yeah.
Second,
Arvinas,
Alright.
aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Stein, aye.
Walton, I.
All right.
Go
Right.
Celtics.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Good
for
night.
getting it done.
Yeah.
Who's
Good night,
winning?
everybody.
Good
Good
night.
job, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good one.
You too, Jim.